Reddit, where millions share their ideas, stories, and perspectives. While it's been used for many great things in the past, there is a darker side to the site. While it calls itself the front page of the internet, that also takes in the bad sides of it too. And so today, we're taking a closer look at some of Reddit's most disturbing users. Introducing ViolentAcrez. When Reddit started back in 2008, it didn't have all the subreddits we see today. There were only a handful of subreddit forums, and they could only be created by its paid staff members and administrators. For instance, our Not Safe for Work was the place where anything adult entertainment related would go. Our Technology for everything tech, and pretty much everything that didn't have a sub would go to our Reddit. But as the website grew rapidly, it soon became clear to those running Reddit that trying to filter out everything was next to impossible. As a result, in 2008, they made the decision to let anybody create a subreddit. Little did they realize that this would open Pandora's box. The only rule regarding these new subreddits and what users would post was that it was nothing illegal for the website to host. A user by the name of ViolentAcrez, or VA, quickly took advantage of this new ability, creating multiple disturbing subreddits, such as Beating Women, a subreddit for pictures and videos of violence against women, pics of dead kids, the name says it all, and just so many more, Chokerbitch, Rapebait, N-word jailbait. But one subreddit in particular would take off, and it's one that haunts Reddit to this day. The idea behind our jailbait was to post sexualized images of minors that don't fit into the CSAM definition. Basically, get as close as you can to CSAM without crossing into illegal territory. While VA claimed to have made the subreddit as a joke to troll the entire Reddit community, it would inadvertently explode, and by the end of the year, it would actually be voted as subreddit of the year. For the Reddit admins, this did pose a major threat to the site's credibility, but initially they were silent about it, because they used to believe in free speech. But to what extent? As we're talking about a subreddit where there were thousands of pictures of minors. Many of them weren't aware they were being photographed. Some were probably a result of child abuse, and clearly the sub was filled with pedos. But still, Reddit's founders weren't doing anything about it. In fact, they were the ones benefiting from the traffic that Jailbait was bringing to the website. And in the early days, they needed all the numbers they could get. In fact, by 2010, Jailbait was the #2 search term responsible for Reddit's traffic. They were likely avoiding anything to do with the sub as Reddit positioned itself as a place of free speech. And since the sub wasn't doing anything technically illegal, they made the decision to stay out of it. Jailbait was one of the platform's free speech havens, allowing content that was legal but morally and ethically questionable. The biggest issue they need to deal with would be moderating a subreddit like Jailbait, making sure it didn't enter into CP category. While they had paid moderators, VA had appointed his own moderators for Jailbait. The sub had a list of rules that made sure it remained within the guidelines. At the same time, it had rules to ensure it was borderline CP. For instance, VA didn't want anybody who looked too old to be posted on the subreddit, so if the person in the image looked older than they supposedly should be, the image would be rejected. It was a tightly moderated subreddit, and that was a benefit to Reddit's admins. It meant the one place where CP would most likely be posted was monitored very well, so they didn't need their own staff to go through the horrific images. In fact, in the background, the VA and Reddit admins spoke regularly. He was one of Reddit's most active users, running multiple subreddits, but the fact that he was the creator and supporter of such a subreddit, the creator of this entire movement, was enough red flags to believe that this guy might be a serious threat in real life. As the years went on, the sub picked up more and more traffic, and although some had an issue with it, it had become the norm somehow. It was part of Reddit, and it stood as proof that the admins admired free speech, even if they didn't agree with it, which is exactly how Eric Martin, the general manager of Reddit, felt about VA subreddits. Before we move on, I want to tell you about Rocket Money. A few months back, I found myself paying all these bills for subscriptions I didn't even want, Netflix, Prime, and just random apps I never used. Honestly, I was just clicking on these apps without giving it much thought, not realizing that these free trials turned into paid subscriptions. And the real headache began when I tried to cancel these subscriptions. You log into your account and you spend what feels like an eternity navigating through confusing menus, and when you finally stumble across the cancel option, it's never even over. The apps usually ask you to confirm the cancellation via email link, and it's the same with music apps too. For me, I was lost in a maze of menus, figuring out how to cancel these subscriptions. And after spending countless hours on this, not only did I realize I was unnecessarily spending money on these subscriptions, but I also recognized the sheer amount of time I was wasting trying to cancel them. And this is exactly where Rocket Money comes in. Rocket Money is this incredible personal finance app that's been a game changer for me. It helps you cancel all those pesky subscriptions you forgot about, lowering your bills and allowing you to manage your money way better. With the app, I could cancel all these unwanted subscriptions that I had, and there was no need to call customer service or anything like that. But that's not all. I'm also using Rocket Money to lower my bills. I just had to upload a photo of my internet bill, and with a few taps, Rocket Money was on it, negotiating my bill for me. It's been such a relief knowing I'm not overpaying for services anymore. So if you're looking to save more and spend less, I can't recommend Rocket Money enough. It's helped its customers save an average of up to $740 a year, with over $500 million in cancelled subscriptions. This is huge. So why not join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today? Go to rocketmoney.com/mooncrime or click the link in the description to get started for free. And there's even more features you can unlock with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/mooncrime to get started for free. In an Ask Me Anything, he was asked what he thinks about subreddits such as rjailbait and rpics of dead kids, to which he replied, "Personally, I think they're gross, but let's take the infamous pics of dead kids for example. The actual content of that subreddit is mostly autopsy photos. If the name of the subreddit was r/autopsy photos, or do you really want to go into criminal forensics, and they were sincere in their discussion of these images, would some of that 98% now be okay with it? I would bet at least some would. What if it wasn't kids but adults, or historical autopsy photos only? The point is, I don't want to be the one making those decisions for anyone but myself, and it's not the business Reddit is in. We are a free speech site with very few exceptions, and having to stomach occasional troll subreddits like pics of dead kids or morally questionable subreddits like jailbait is all part of the price of free speech." But something major took place in 2011. CNN's Anderson Cooper had a segment on his show about Reddit, with a focus directly on rjailbait. This was obviously a huge exposure to the world, as most people didn't really use Reddit, and exposed a very disturbing side to the wider world of one of the internet's biggest social media sites. During the segment, Anderson Cooper mentioned VA directly as one of the jailbait moderators, and even questioned Eric Martin on why he'd allow such content on the website, to which Eric replied, quote, "We're a free speech site, and the cost of that is there is stuff that is offensive on there. Once we start taking down some things we find offensive, then we're no longer a free speech site, and no longer a platform for everyone. We're exerting editorial control, and that's not what we are." Something he would change his mind on soon enough, as Anderson Cooper's co-stars called the content borderline kiddie porn and called out Reddit for its policy. Even if they aren't, don't we want them to be good corporate citizens? What happened to decency? What happened to corporations doing the right thing? Why would you have a website that sexualizes young girls? I looked at lots of the pictures and I thought they were very close to CP. Clearly Anderson wanted the sub closed, as many in the world did, but it almost immediately backfired on him as jailbait hit record numbers in views and subscribers right after the segment ended. But he did make his case against what Reddit was allowing. And while Anderson won't admit that he didn't see anything that did cross into the illegal territory, this put Reddit into a whole lot of hot water, all because VA created one of the most disturbing subreddits out there. But for ViolentAcrez, it wasn't his problem, and he kept things going. While he wasn't too focused on moderating the jailbait subreddit anymore, and focused more on pics of dead kids and similar still disturbing pictures, VA was still controlling Reddit in the sense of appointing various moderators. He had huge influence on the site. Even with all of these red flags, he was the one controlling a huge amount of what people see on the internet. But the interview with Anderson Cooper was becoming a real problem for Reddit, with all eyes on them now, and how they'd react to the mainstream media's pushback on Reddit's free speech stance. Reddit was forced to cave in shortly after Anderson's exposure, and eventually ban the jailbait subreddit. While there was some pushback, particularly in private messages between VA and other site moderators, VA had to let it happen. The public reason given for the banning of the sub, according to Eric Martin, was, quote, "I banned rjailbait, after which I talked to ViolentAcrez on IM. We talked about the ban and I tried to explain why I banned it. He didn't agree with the ban. There was never any threat to ban VA for this or anything else associated with his real name as he implied. I banned the subreddit because of some of the mods who were added and the specific situation that was created with them. Many of them had been repeatedly banned from Reddit for various reasons. The situation was out of control. I offered to unban rjailbait if those mods were removed. VA did not want that. I have made this offer again, but he feels, I think, that if he cannot add whatever mods he wants, then it should stay banned. I don't agree with him on that, but I understand his point. However, just a few months later, Reddit would make the official move to changing its policies and removing such content for good. In an updated title, quote, "A necessary change in policy," Reddit included a line saying, quote, "Today we are adding another rule, no suggestive or sexual content featuring minors." They also addressed the free speech problem, saying, quote, "We understand that this might make some of you worried about the slippery slope from banning one specific type of content to banning other types of content. We're concerned about that too, and do not make this policy change lightly or without careful deliberation. We will tirelessly defend the right to freely share information on Reddit in any way we can, even if it's offensive or discusses something that may be illegal. However, CP is a toxic and unique case for internet communities, and we're protecting Reddit's ability to operate by removing this threat. We remain committed to protecting Reddit as an open platform." Right after the update, all of these TP-based subreddits were then banned. This once again opened up a whole can of worms, as its community was unhappy about it. ViolentAcrez in particular would speak out about it. For VA, this was not something he agreed with, and because he was such a powerful voice in Reddit, his say mattered. He'd even join in on an Ask Me Anything, where he'd tell the community his true thoughts. While he remained moderate about his opinions over the situation, he would explain that he felt it was a sign of the inevitable decline of Reddit, and that his relationship with the mods had been tainted, as they no longer spoke to or associated themselves with VA. In the same Ask Me Anything, he would even go into detail on the fact that he had slept with and had oral sex with his stepdaughter. But that was it for VA. He continued to moderate various other subs and life went on. But then one day, ViolentAcrez was eventually banned from Reddit, as they wanted to bury all the evidence of their past. In May 2012, a writer for Gorka named Adrian Chan was seeking as much information on who VA actually was. After some time, he eventually found out VA's in real life identity, and explained that Gorka would soon release a story about VA along with his real name and a picture of him. He called to find out if VA had anything to say before his info would be released. VA asked him not to release the article, fearing he'd lose his job as a result. Quote, "It's amazing how much you can sweat in a 60-degree office," Adrian Chen said before putting the phone down. And just a few days later, a Gorka post named ViolentAcrez as a 49-year-old Michael Brueck. Doxing on Reddit was not allowed, and it was something ViolentAcrez ironically was against, all whilst posting various pictures of individuals online. But as doxing wasn't allowed on Reddit, for a day there was a site-wide ban on the Gorka article. But eventually this was lifted, and ViolentAcrez had been revealed to the world for who he truly was. Whilst this wouldn't mean prison for ViolentAcrez, and nothing he did technically being illegal, he didn't face too many repercussions. In fact, his job as a moderator on Reddit was to make sure that things were posted there remained both legal and within Reddit's rules. But he had supported and posted a whole bunch of the most repulsive stuff you can possibly think of, and his real life would be impacted dramatically. And let's just say he looked exactly as you'd think he would. But it turned out he was married, and the stepdaughter he had sex with was revealed, as well as his son and stepson who were both in the US military at the time. But as he had feared, VA would lose his job as a software programmer. He lost his health insurance, and with nothing to hide a week later, he joined CNN with Anderson Cooper for an interview. For the most part, he still defended what jailbait was, and he kept up the stance that these subreddits should have remained. While trying to be apologetic, he really wasn't. When asked if he was apologizing for what he had done, this was his response.
I am to some degree apologizing for what I did. Again, I was playing to an audience of college kids. And you know, when 2 years ago, when all of this was at its height, the audience was appreciative and supportive of the sort of gallows humor that I put out there.
Then he'd go on to show a reward he had received from Reddit for creating the jailbait sub, but with such a reputation behind his name, he clearly struggled to find work again. He attempted to leverage his notoriety by seeking employment in the adult content industry and soliciting financial support through PayPal, but that was the end of ViolentAcrez, this creepy old man. But what truly stands out is how far people are willing to push the limits and throw away every bit of ethics out of the door. Reddit makes it easy because of his anonymity, but this next user did something just as repulsive as VA, and still remains on Reddit to this day. Somebody has a fetish for, well, anything it seems. That's why Rule 34 exists. If it exists, there's some porno of it. So it's no surprise that Reddit has dedicated communities to adult pictures of the deceased. In fact, there was even a pics of dead jailbait subreddits back in the day. But there's a difference between those who might get off on such a thing and those who have sexually engaged with dead people. Necrophilia, for those who don't know, is the sexual act of engaging with a dead body. One would think that no one in their right mind would ever want to do this. But of course, on Reddit, it's a whole other story. Reddit user NDabhetari is all for it, and she actually confessed to doing the deed with the dead. Even more so, she openly discusses the idea that necrophilia and cannibalism should be accepted. Her poetry points to Satanism, and she's not hiding it. But this isn't a troll pretending. This is an actual disturbing Reddit user that exists. There is no doubt she has mental illnesses, probably from a traumatizing past, and her life choices have landed her in some very extreme circumstances. So who is this Reddit user, and how did she get there in the first place? Leniti is a Reddit user that runs NDabhetari Reddit account. Her story is not only tragic, but also so disturbing. Leniti was born in America, Indiana, but is ethnically Kurdish. Tragically, her mother passed away during childbirth in 1998, and her brother and father blamed her for it, and sadly, it seems her father pushed her brother into blaming her. Both her dad and her brother were strict Muslims, and at the age of 4 years old, Leniti's father tried to bury her alive due to something she had done that he felt was shameful to the family and the community. According to Leniti, his neighbors had even given him permission and condone the actions. When a Redditor asked if she was sure it was her father, she said, quote, "I am 100% sure it was my father, as it was a sanctioned mercy killing. And when he had a small change of heart, for whatever reason, I still went back to the same house and lived with him. At the same time, I didn't really know, but it was because he was taking anger out of me in a sense. It's not too uncommon in the Middle East, especially for women to be mercy killed, but I don't know the English term for it, but me being born caused my mother to pass, and he never forgave me for it," end quotes. This ultimately led her to go live with her grandmother, where she would grow up in a strict home, where she wasn't even allowed to drink soda, as her grandmother likened it to alcohol, and at the young age of 8, she was under the care of a Muslim lady named Noya, somebody whom she'd eventually fallen in love with. One day she was quickly walking along the street with Noya, when Noya quickly pulled Lenetti to the side, held her waist, and let off a fart. This random moment turned into a significant one for Lenetti, where she developed a fart fetish, which may sound disgusting and random, but it clearly led Lenetti down a path where other fetishes played a role in her life too. However, she wouldn't realize this until much later. As she grew into her teen years, she started accepting her lesbian lifestyle, turning away from all religion and being rebellious altogether. So in 2014, Lenetti dropped out of school and begged her cousin for money to buy herself a ticket to Kobani. Eventually, when her cousin gave her the money, she was exposed to how terrorists treated people and had no regard for human life. Even though she was insecure and wanted to fit in and find validation in herself as a Kurdish woman, she felt very passionate about getting involved and doing something effective for her people. Lenetti had to return to America after 7 months and eventually completed high school in 2016. It frustrated her that she was doing nothing in the interim. Everyone in her family had in one way or another joined a military group, except for her older brother. Now it was her time and she couldn't wait to return to that environment. First she joined the Marine Corps, but when her recruiter would not allow her to be in the infantry due to her gender, which at the time was a default rule, she quit and left for Kurdistan in September 2016. This would give her the more hands-on role that she wanted and found in the country of her origin. At first she told her grandmother that she was going to help her father and her brother, but over time she did reveal to them her true intentions to join the Kobani, and they were not in favor of her going, and so her military career would start against basically the former Iraqi military, Al-Qaeda and some other groups. The conditions to which she was subjected regarding sources of food and water were almost non-existent. They would eat insects, grass, and leaves boiled with sugar water just to put something in their stomachs. In such conditions, it's natural to have a dark sense of humor, but what started as a dark sense of humor would kick off another more gross and horrifying fetish that is a high cringe factor for most people. They would joke about necrophilia, but Lenetti would take it further. They were surrounded by dead people as they were in an active war zone, and so one day she found one of the women's bodies attractive and gave it a go. She had truly convinced herself it was all okay. She ended up enjoying it, and so she did it again and again. It was clearly something she truly enjoyed, as she started writing poems about it, posting it to Reddit. Quote, "Necrophilia started as a dark humor joke, then later festered into a fetish for me that soon led to other mental illnesses, and then me being discharged from the military. Although she admits to only engaging in the practice herself 4 times, it has left her advocating for it ever since on social media. Sort of the same reason I think necrophilia is attractive. A woman lifeless sometimes is intriguing, and she seems peaceful. I like seeing the insides and things too. I still think it's cute in a way as well, I don't know." Lenetti explains that just because a person is dead, they do not lose their attractiveness. She justifies it by saying that because they're dead, no one is getting hurt, which suggests how deeply cut off she is from her emotions. Lenetti has expressed on Reddit that if in her power, she would legalize necrophilia or at least have it consensual. She explains that she would prefer that while still alive, he give written consent to the practice since they would not technically be there since they would already be dead. She references how medically you can consent to using your dead body for parts, except you consent to necrophilia instead. In one post, Lenetti says, "I don't even consider myself one, but I don't believe it's wrong to touch someone who's dead within certain prerequisites. And I'll die on that hill, but I have another fetish that trumps anything for me, and I also don't fetishize someone because they are dead. I just don't care if they are or not." Again, just indicating how psychopathic this girl truly is. In other Reddit posts, she's spoken of cannibalism. Although she says she has never practiced it herself, she can not only see the reason for it, but also understands it. This, however, in reflection of her war experiences, can be justified from an outside point of view in a time of fighting for survival. But then she also says eating human meat would be interesting, like in a restaurant. In a Reddit post wondering if anyone would participate in eating human meat, her response is not just upsetting, it's morbid and twisted at best. She writes, quote, "I mean, it's just people, especially if they're preparing it nicely. I'd forget it was a person. I wonder if I'd get to choose between male and female, or the age of the person, or the part of the body. Maybe get the head, not to eat the brain of course, but like a decoration in my house, or as a sex toy or something. I wonder if they'd sell red wine as well. I don't drink anymore, but only for special occasions like that. I feel it'd go well with the long pig. Oh, and maybe they can give you a photo of the person before they were slaughtered if requested. I'd want to see who I'm digging into, you know." In another post titled, "If given the chance would you commit cannibalism?" she says, "Yes, also free of disease. I want to try pasta in different stages, like raw versus cooked. I know raw won't taste that good, but I'm still curious about parts of the body that I want to try to eat. And cooked, I'd even serve it to my family and see what they think their neighbor tastes like, and tell them after they ate them, heavily curious in their reaction. Her Reddit account is her online open diary in a sense, and she says she doesn't care what anyone thinks, where she writes poetry of the most disturbing caliber, where she talks about necrophilia and other very deranged subjects carefree on Reddit, although caution is advised if you ever do browse her account. Some of the footage is really not for the faint-hearted. To a concerned response that she needs help, she revealed, "I do get you. However, as far as therapy goes, I do receive it. However, necrophilia and aproctophilia are the only fetishes I have. Nothing but curiosity is gained from cannibalism. But necrophilia has died down a lot over time. We can presume this is mostly due to her not being in a war environment anymore. The only thing about necrophilia that does seem to upset her is that you might get arrested if you dig up a body and have sex with it. Textbook psychology would say that she too blames herself, and that the core reason she does this is out of self-hatred. It's all self-destructive. At this point then, it shouldn't surprise you that her poetry is just as messed up as her life story. It not only makes your skin crawl, but shows huge insight into how low she would go. Saying things like, quote, "I prayed to Satan and fucked by God by all my weird stunts. Child's play, and I'm not talking about the movie, with blood I get groovy. Stitching chicks' booties. And I sleep in coffins, but I'm not dead like you fucks. I'm a cuck that likes to watch knives stuck in brains, and bodies filling dumps. Blood is a must, like necrophilic lust." Imagine being so messed up that you make poetry about it. You advocate the practice of it and attempt to justify it. Necrophilia is disgusting. It is one of the worst things you can do, and is hugely illegal. And well, not something that happens every day for most people. But her Reddit page is just filled with this kind of footage that you would expect from someone like this. It's horrifying, destructive, and outright shocking. It does raise the question though, when you're around the dead so much, does it ruin your mind to the point of accepting sex with the dead? Imagine you supply the wrong drug to someone and they die from it. Imagine the guilt you would feel. Well, this Redditor confessed to it online, but it wasn't just one person. It could potentially have been 7 to 8 people. The color drained from his face as the realization hit that he had supplied the wrong drug to his customers and that he was responsible for their deaths. This drug was of course fentanyl. Dealing drugs on the dark web seemed like a good idea at the time. It's one of the only real get-rich-quick schemes out there. An easy way to clear up debt and get on top, so to speak. Being lazy, who doesn't want a get-rich-quick scheme? By getting money so quick and easy, you can even start your own business and invest into your own dreams. However, the consequences of bad decisions always come at a cost. An anonymous user, Mesk997, had no idea what he was getting himself into. He was a drug addict himself, so why not make money from it? He was already dealing drugs on the streets, but this itself carried a high risk of being busted. There was nothing glamorous about secret meetings in dark alleyways with sketchy people you have no idea what their intentions are, never knowing if your next handshake is met with handcuffs or a gunshot. It's risky and dangerous. Of course, he put measurements in place to ensure his safety, like not allowing anyone to know where he lived. But when he read about a little Tor browser and a site called the Silk Road, he realized this was his opportunity. Now, the Silk Road, if you don't already know, was a dark web marketplace where you could purchase anything from drugs to guns, stolen credit cards, and it's all in secret. Through encrypted addresses, the Tor browser, and payments being via Bitcoin, all transactions were anonymous, and the illegal dealers were protected. And in most cases on the dark web, it's only the top guys that actually get busted, as it's so hard to track down the dealers selling that police only go after the most dangerous and the biggest distributors. But if you're small time, the risks are less. So Mesk997 started small, with only a selection of 3 drugs in his online store. They were ketamine, meth, and weed. No big deal. The money began to flow in, and besides a few scams where he lost money, it paled in comparison to what he did make online, which he saved up as part of his plan. He already had $25,000 saved, so almost instantly he was on his way to achieving his financial goals. It was so easy. All you had to do was put your product on the site, make sure the user sent their payments into escrow, then send off the package to the guy's house with a printed address, and the money would be released. The reviews came in, and his store was thriving. And it was here that Mesk would meet someone who could supply anything, and I mean anything. From LSD to PCP to fentanyl. And as is the case with most people on the dark web, greed set in. This easy money cash cow was a golden opportunity, so why not milk it for every last drop? So Mesk would expand his range of drugs. At the time, it wasn't very common to cut heroin with fentanyl, so his customers were only after the fentanyl on its own. Feeling professional and getting his ducks in a row, he made himself an Excel spreadsheet with his customers' names, zip codes, and their name of poison, and the amount of their order. This was for better control of the business now that he had expanded his range. However, Mesk997 did something that most businessmen don't. He mixed business with pleasure, so the saying goes. Don't get high on your own supply. Even if it was only weed, when you're dealing, you need a clear head, and you need to make sure that you're not doing it to fuel your drug addiction. Fentanyl and mescaline look identical, but they're very different drugs. Both come in white powder form, but the doses used would be significantly different, and the effects are completely opposite. Fentanyl is an opioid, 50 times stronger than heroin. Of course, as we all know today, it's extremely dangerous. It's one of the worst drugs ravaging America right now, killing 250 Americans every every day. Whereas mescaline opens up your mind, it makes you see the consciousness in the universe, and all of your inner thoughts in a completely new perspective, being one of the most potent, indigenous psychedelic drugs out there. So mixing these up would be a very big mistake. You'd have some people looking to expand their mind and explore their consciousness, whereas others wanted to numb their pain dramatically. But by the time he took the drugs and lost control of the order of things, he would make a fatal mistake, where 7 of his mescaline customers would receive fentanyl, and because of that, an instant death sentence. Mesk 997 went about his business for 5 days before someone contacted him, saying that their friend died of mescaline, which he couldn't believe. In fact, he went so far as to call it BS. That was how sure he was. No one dies from psychedelics. After all, he had an Excel spreadsheet. Everything was under control. You can't overdose on psychedelics. Or was it even psychedelics to begin with? After checking his spreadsheet and doing a small and quick stock count, he had about 11 grams of mescaline overstocked. So the penny dropped, and as the blood drained from his face, he realized the error he had made and was powerless to stop it. The store had a function showing when the last customer was online, and using that, he was able to see that all the users that he supplied were last online about 3 days ago. No one he'd supplied that particular day had finalized their purchase either. This was when panic set in, and he quickly deleted his store. He sold whatever drugs he had and got out of the business. He converted his Bitcoin and cashed it out. He didn't even need to confirm his suspicions. He just knew that he completely messed up, the game was over, and he had to go on the run. He had blood on his hands now, and his crimes had just got so much worse. Whatever get-rich-quick scheme he thought he had going had led to a fatal dent in the road, one that would mark him for life. So he decided to run away and get clean. The weight was so heavy on his shoulders that he began to cut everyone off and became introverted to deal with his guilt. He went back to the 9-to-5 job that he was so desperate to avoid, by working as a waiter in a restaurant and trying everything he could to get back to normal life. However, he couldn't let it go, especially when he found out that 4 customers had definitely died, and worse yet, 1 customer shared it with a friend and they both died too. This crushing guilt led him to confess to it on Reddit, as he felt he couldn't tell anyone what had happened. Most of the comments didn't excuse him for what he did, but also presented the fact that all drug users know the risks. One comment was a former addict who said he always tasted a bit first to be sure. While he did make bad decisions and certainly didn't intend any harm, he says he doesn't feel like he has the right to live. He thinks about it all the time and it's ruined his life. He has become a recluse and a shell of who he used to be. Now we all make mistakes, but it's important to take responsibility as part of healing. Being clean and quitting drug dealing was a significant step towards his recovery from the situation. One comment said she was a therapist and advised to tread lightly if he chose to tell a therapist, as they are required by law to inform the police if anyone was killed, murdered, etc. And if he did turn himself in, he would be up for murder, as what he was doing was completely illegal, and he would spend a long time behind bars. And it's so creepy knowing that there's all these people out there, online, in the real world, who have done these heinous acts and still walk free today. But the guilt will never leave him, as his life and perception has been permanently changed.